whether we like it or not, we grow from our experiences. We grow stronger from our experience in life. And so you don't wish adversity on anyone, right? You don't wish bad things, but we do find that we have more inner strength, I think, than we oftentimes believe we might have.
Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. We don't always get to choose what life throws at us, but we can choose how to respond. When Terry Healey was 20, he was a thriving student at UC Berkeley. A sudden rare cancer diagnosis and an 11-hour surgery changed his life overnight. Terry opens up about how he turned that moment into a source of strength. We discuss his rebar framework for bouncing back, rebuilding your confidence after setbacks, and finding the resilience to keep moving forward. I hope you enjoy the conversation. This podcast is brought to you by TELUS Smart Home Security. Secure, simplify, and easily monitor your home from anywhere using the Smart Home Security app. Visit TELUS.com/smarthome-security to learn more about Canada's most trusted security provider. Hi, Terry. It's really good to see you.
Hey, Tamara, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So for people who aren't familiar with your work and your advocacy and your life's work, let's start with a little bit about yourself first. Everything I read about you, it always kind of starts with the story. When Terry was 20, he was a thriving student at UC Berkeley, right? Like it was like you were just like this all around. It sounded like you were almost a superhero when I hear things.
No, don't go that far.
So why don't we start with how your life really, changed?
I was, like you said, a senior in college. I like to say I was living life on easy street, Things didn't seem to go wrong until suddenly they did. And I had this bump on the right side of my nose that started to push my right nostril out. And so it was a very tough situation for the medical care that I was seeing to diagnose. It took 8 weeks to get a diagnosis after my first doctor visit, but ultimately I was diagnosed with something that was rare. However, the prognosis was very good. And so again, I sort of took that news, even though it was devastating to be told you have cancer, I took that as, well, it looks promising. It doesn't look like it's going to be too scary. And by the way, I'm 21 years old and I'm invincible, right? So I went about my way, and it really was 6 months later before my whole world drastically turned upside down.
And how did it drastically turn upside down?
Yeah, so in that 6-month period, basically they found this tumor. It was a fibrosarcoma, a very rare form of cancer, and they were able to excise it. And upon the examination, they said, we've got clear margins. We don't need to do any other kind of treatment. But 6 months later, I began to feel these tingling sensations in my cheek. Kind of felt like ants were crawling through my skin. So I went back, and suddenly, even though I hadn't had the CT scan yet, even though they didn't know exactly what was going on, that visit to the hospital, that visit to my doctor, I should say, was very eye-opening, because he went into really fast motion where he said, you know what, we need to schedule you for that CT scan, but I also want to get you with the tumor board. So he was already sure that this thing was a recurrence, which it was. And long story short is I ended up having a 10.5-hour procedure that resulted in the removal of half of my nose, the shelf of my right eye, the muscle and the bone from my right cheek, part of my upper lip, part of my hard palate, and 6 of my teeth. And I woke up attached to my chest because they had transplanted a full thickness skin graft from my chest to fill in this cavity that had been created on my face. And so suddenly my world was not only turned upside down, because it was like, oh my God, I look like the Elephant Man, which is what I look like. But my concerns weren't about my appearance at that point, because they were pretty sure that, hey, don't worry about that. We can reconstruct that. Let's focus on the cancer. So initially, that was my huge concern, rightfully so, was life or death, right?
And you're at university, you're young. You are really just starting your journey in life, really, right? Like we think we are when we're in elementary school or high school, but once you kind of leave high school and the world is yours, right? And now this has happened to you. What was your support system like around you at that time?
Very, very blessed to have a really strong support system, family and friends who are incredible, um, full of positive energy, nurturing, all of the things that you would wish for. So I was blessed that I had that because that was one of the most important parts of my survival, right?
So you have your surgery. You Is there treatment involved here, or was it just surgery that got rid of all the cancer?
It was surgery followed by more surgery. So there were two more procedures. And that's when you start to say, oh my God, are they ever going to get this? And then it was, well, we think we have clear margins, but now we need to do radiation therapy. And then after radiation therapy, it was iridium seed implants. Um, but that was the extent of it. It was localized. I was very blessed again because my type of cancer can metastasize to the lungs. That's what it does. Mine hadn't done that, so they were able to treat it locally with radiation. I didn't need chemotherapy at that time. And so that was the scope of it.
It's interesting because I always and I think I have a feeling you're going to agree with me. When it comes to cancer and all these, it's such a worry, right? It's like you are worried you're going to die. Like, I mean, that's just what it is. And your worry is going to come back. You're worried is there's a lot of worry and a lot of bad news. And I always say to anyone I know going through cancer, and this is what got me through also is, there's always good news in the bad news. And I can hear that in what you're saying, right? Like, yeah, I was worried about this, but this was also good. And like it is all bad, but there also are little nuggets of good news in there. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think, and that is a choice for all of us that we have to make, right? We choose our attitude. We choose whether we want to focus on negative self-talk or positive self-talk. Fortunately, because of the foundation of faith I had, I think, and the hope that gave me tremendous ability to stay positive and have that positive mindset, which, by the way, I think is a big part of that is gratitude, because when you're grateful for things in your life, which we all should be and we all can be, it makes the bad things less bad. You know what I mean? Like if you start with gratitude, it's like, well, actually, I have a lot to be grateful for. So then if you start to sink back into where you're at, it's not as bad as it could have been if you just went straight there to that dark place.
Right. And listen, it's not like it's easy. None of it's easy, right? And I think even the most positive people, even the most, grateful people have their moments. Is resilience a muscle that we have to work?
Absolutely, it is. I think we all have the capacity for resilience. We all have the capacity to build it. We can all learn to adapt. We can all learn to recover from setbacks. But I think the one thing about it is that whether we like it or not, we grow from our experiences. We grow stronger from our experience in life. And so you don't wish adversity on anyone, right? You don't wish bad things, but we do find that we have more inner strength, I think, than we oftentimes believe we might have. So I do think, and that's why I have this, whole framework about how to deal with adversity, because you do have to, it's like working out, right? That muscle memory, you might have it at one point, but unless you just keep working on it, you're going to lose that. So it's a constant approach, but I don't think of it as a chore. I think of it more as a gift because it's liberating in so many ways.
Yes, very much so. So, can we talk a little bit about the importance of reframing? And you know, how we shift from loss, focus, right? And then we move into the ability to be focused, right? That's hard to do when you're in the thick of, I mean, it could be, and maybe it's not cancer for somebody. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's job loss. Maybe it's a relationship loss. Maybe it's the death of somebody close. It could be so many things, right? How do we, how do we, how do we shift our thinking?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And there's a lot to that. I think that it takes more than one thing. It takes a number of things that you have to work on. And don't get me wrong, I went to a dark place and I struggled and I fought through it. And one day at a time, though, you kind of have to pick up the pieces and try to figure out what works for you. And it may not be the same things for everybody, um, but I would say we've already talked about some of the things um, in terms of reframing. But I think one of the things I learned when I went to group therapy that really struck me was that a lot of people were not balanced in their lives. They had been diagnosed with something horrible and they were really consumed by it. So they had left their jobs. Um, they were asking for a lot of help at home, which is fine. Um, However, I felt like they lost their balance in life, which affects how you behave. It affects your self-esteem a little bit. It affects sort of how you move forward with each day. And to me, it's a lot about how you find a way to regain some of the confidence and self-esteem you've lost. And so there's a whole bunch of tools and things like that that people can use. Um, and some are really simple, and I think that some people think that a lot of these efforts are too much. It's work, but things like visualization, um, things like reflection, they only take a few minutes. And so you probably hear people talk about meditation only takes a few minutes. Some people think it's this big thing. It doesn't have to be. And so it starts with reflection, in my opinion, and that's where everything starts. And if you give yourself the time to reflect and accept and be grateful, then everything else becomes a little bit easier, but it helps open up your mind, makes you more aware of what's happening around you. And I think that's the way to start.
That's good advice. And when you just said, oh, when I was in group therapy, it's interesting because we often look at someone who's healed from something that happened, right? Long time ago, right? You were, 21 years old. And we think that it looks easy because now you write books and you give talks and you do all these things and you seem super resilient and confident. But you said, when I was in group therapy, so I immediately went, oh, wait a minute. It was a reminder to me just in that moment, you've done a lot of work. And you know what I mean? Like it doesn't happen overnight and it's okay. And maybe tomorrow you'll wake up and you'll have a bad day or something. And then you know how to, but it's so important to remember that we don't heal overnight from anything.
No, no. Yeah, to your point, you don't want to sugarcoat it and say, hey, use this framework. It's really easy. It's not. Um, it does take effort. But I go back, you just hit on the whole group therapy thing. Well, the group therapy thing came about because of reflection stemming from an experience I had with someone who opened my eyes to a world that I never knew existed about who I was as a person. And that's when I realized, whoa, this isn't about rebuilding my face anymore. This is about rebuilding my person because my person has been destroyed and I have lost my identity. I have lost my sense of self-esteem, all these things, right?
Self-esteem. There's a topic. Self-esteem. When You must know a little bit about that. Yeah, you must know a little bit about that. That's a topic I don't think that any of us talk enough about. I feel like we used to talk about it, but now there's just so many other things to talk about that we forget about our own self-esteem, our own confidence. Eh, How, did you lose your confidence when you were diagnosed?
Completely. So not right when I was diagnosed, right? What it took, again, like everything, it took time. But over time, as I began to realize that these dozens and dozens of surgeries weren't going to fix the way I look, that's when I began to realize, you know what? I'm never going to be that old Terry again. And I had sunk to a low, right? I had no self-confidence left. I went from being highly self-confident to having low self-esteem and everything. And that wake up call with this woman who I just mentioned, woke me up to who I was. Thank God for that, because that was really the beginning. So 5 to 6 years after that major procedure, before I started to really focus on rebuilding who I was. And so, yeah, it took time and it took some work, but I realized that I had to focus on something else, which was my inner person and finding that inner strength. And so there's a whole bunch of things that go into that I think help you one step at a time build that self-confidence back. And some are simpler than others.
Well, you write that we aren't born with low confidence. It's chipped away by events and by people. Ouch. I think you're right. I think you're right. We're not born thinking that, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I don't have, I can't do this, we're not born like that.
It all starts at a very young age when, if you think back to your first days in school, I think, you start to think about how were you treated? How did the teachers behave around you? How did the students behave around? I mean, that's, I can go all the way back there and think about the points of impact, positive and negative, right? Fortunately, in my case, there were probably more positives than negatives. And so I found that point of self-confidence as a young person. But with bullying and everything else that goes on, it's really hard for many, many people, I think.
And usually that bullying or that chipping away of someone's self-confidence when we're young, it usually happens because we're different. Because we look different, we act different, we're not the norm or whatever that means. And so this happened to you with all these surgeries you had. So not only were you dealing with physical, excruciating pain from the surgeries and healing, like excruciating, but you also then had this inner stuff happening where it was your confidence was being chipped away at. So when you write about the little things effect. So and you just mentioned the little things. Can you give us like a couple of examples of things that we could do to help us with our confidence?
Yeah, I mean, one that I think works really, really well, and I talk with actually kids all the way down to the 7th and 8th grade and up, is sort of about identifying how you're going to focus and how you want to approach goals. Because I will tell you, I think most people and most companies instill this thing in you that says, okay, we got three priorities. We have 3 goals. We have 5 goals, whatever it is. It's this big number, right? And people have a hard time getting their heads around it. So as a result, on the professional side, we may not make as much progress as we think we should. On the personal side, it's magnified. If you have the same issues, you got all these goals, it's going to be tough to do. So my philosophy has always been be very singular in your goals. And so rather than setting a multitude of them, because if you have a multitude, you have none, set one at a time, personally and professionally. And when you can focus, you find a lot more success. You chip away at it in a positive way. You make progress. And the thing is, and this is what I learned, was when I started to achieve goals, small and large, I felt better about every one of them. And after I achieved something or overcame something, I felt like, man, I can tackle that next thing now. I wasn't worrying about that next thing while I was focused on the other thing. So I really think that's a huge way to build confidence in life. And so focus is essential. And so that was a big part of my whole story, I think, was just figuring out how to get focused.
I like that. And you also write about low expectations lead to poor performance and high expectations fuel better outcomes. I find that interesting. I have high expectations, I think, of myself. And sometimes people say, oh, you should lower your expectations of not only yourself, but the people around you. It's why you get so disappointed. And I always laugh at that, right? It's like, I don't want to lower my expectations. I like having high expectations for, how does that work for people? Yeah, I think so, don't you? But it's hard to have high expectations when you're feeling down.
Yes, it is. But I will also say that when you're in the midst of something that's taking you down, and you start to feel like you're getting consumed by what you're doing, you need to find other outlets in life to get your mind off those daily stressors. And those can be fun things. I mean, goals don't have to be hard. Like, oh my God, I've got to do this huge project. It's going to take me a year. It's hard. I mean, they can be fun things that you've always wanted to do. Those help build confidence too. For example, right? Pick up an instrument. And I did this. I learned how to play the guitar. I don't have a great ear for music, Tamara. I don't. So for me, it wasn't easy, but it was fun because I made progress every week. I'd go to my teacher. I made progress. I felt better about myself. This was something that was outside of, my other work life and my work stress. And even those little things, which I think are fun, because let's be honest with ourselves. I mean, this is an extracurricular thing that you've chosen to do. If you don't like it after 3 weeks, quit and find something else. That's okay. But give it a chance, because it takes a while to form a habit and get into a ritual with something.
It's interesting, this conversation, because a lot of what we're talking about, somebody might listen and go, oh, well, this is all easy stuff. Yeah, it is easy stuff. But guess what? Most of us don't do any of it. Like, most of us don't leave our house and go for an evening walk or a morning walk. Most of us don't do that. And I know I don't usually do it. But the other day, I went for a walk in the morning before everybody woke up. I couldn't believe how nice it was and how much better I felt. And I logically knew this, but I never do it.
Right. Tomorrow.
Right? Yes, right? Oh, I'm too busy. I'm too tired. I just want one more cup of coffee. But once I got out there and did it, I thought, oh, there's other people out here and the weather is nice. And look at this. And there's no cars on the road. And like, it was actually nice. And it is these little things, right? That when we add them up and we do these things, they really do help us with all the things we've talked about, your self-esteem and reframing things and just feeling better,
And I think, hitting on the walk thing, I always recommend that to people, because you don't have to go for a long one either, right? If you could find 10 minutes, that's a start, right? And that's enough. But if you can just let your mind go into some form of reflection, especially in the morning, if you did it, you described what you did. You went on this walk and you said how beautiful it is. So you were automatically thinking about how grateful in a way you were. You were saying, God, this is gorgeous. Why don't I do this every day? So now your whole mood is shifted. Your day is going to be better as a result. So I think that's so important.
It is so important. I want to talk about your rebar framework. But before we do that, I just want to mention that we like to thank our guests for being here by asking them to choose a registered Canadian charity. You chose the Canadian Cancer Society. Thank you for choosing them very much. We will make a donation in your name as a thank you. So, really appreciate you choosing them.
Thank you for making that donation.
Yes, yes, of course. Well, thank you for being here. So you have this practical, repeatable method, right, to process for people to process adversity and to renew themselves. So, can you tell us about rebar?
Yeah, I'll try to go through it fairly quickly. I think you hit on it. It's a framework. It's a resilience framework that can serve as a blueprint for any kind of adversity or challenge that people have. And the idea is that it's going to help you through different phases of adversity, and in the process, as we just talked about, help you rebuild confidence, which is a critical part of getting through it and finding oftentimes greater purpose in your own life. And so there's four phases. The first is reflect, the second is build, the third is act, and the fourth is renew. I'll just talk about them really, really briefly. So reflect, we've kind of touched on, but it's really taking a few minutes, five minutes a day, to just step back and start with gratitude, because that puts you in a positive frame of mind. And then just reflect on your day. Did you learn anything? Were you inspired by anything? And you may not be every day, but think about that and then consider, is there something that I learned that maybe I should apply in my life tomorrow? Anyway, that was a big part of my experience. The second phase is build. And build is about developing a positive mindset. It's about developing a growth mindset. And this is when we talked about this earlier, this is when you surround yourself with a supportive team of people that you trust. This is about finding life balance, because that's going to help you feel a lot better too. And it's just having that positivity and that positive frame of mind that's going to help you better navigate challenges in a positive way instead of with doubt and fear. Then you move on to act. Act is where the rubber meets the road. This is when we start to face challenges. This is when we take control. And this is when we set those goals and we start to get focused. We start to take action. Finally, renew is kind of that reinforcement of the whole process. That's when you step back and you say, okay, I've gotten this far. I've achieved something. I should celebrate. So celebrate your wins and reflect on what you learned about yourself. Because if you've gotten to the renew stage, you've survived whatever you went through. So what traits and characteristics do I have that enabled me to find that strength? So it's that kind of reinforcement of the process and that commitment to a process that's going to your earlier point, create that muscle memory, because new things are going to come about, right? And so I live my life every day thinking about these things, and I think of them as gifts, not as chores.
I think, and this is exactly it, right? It's being able to, and this can once again, right? This applies to, I mean, you're somebody who cancer changed your life. I would say that cancer changed my life too. But it's not always about that. Sometimes it's about a career setback. Sometimes it's about, dreams that maybe didn't pan out the way you hoped, or whatever it might be. All of these tools work towards that. And once again, it seems like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes this stuff gets easier when we get older, but I think it also for some people is harder as we get older, because what's that saying? No one gets through this life unscathed, right? And it's so true. But what scathes you could be so many things, right?
What you touch on is really important, though, because I do think people tend to get higher anxiety as they age, which makes things harder. But at the same time, you also gain a lot of wisdom because of your experiences. And so you can think of it as, okay, I can blend those things together and I can improve. I can get better. I can get through.
I think if you blend those two together, it's almost like a superpower. Like, really, you can turn it into a superpower because you have a little bit of wisdom, which can sort of sometimes turn into a, I don't care for any of this garbage anymore. And you're a little bit more focused on it, right? Like, I do think that you can, I do. I like that. I like that.
Anxiety, sometimes it's a lot of stress, right? Stress is not always a terrible thing. Stress can actually be a positive thing because it helps you to focus, and it gives you sometimes a purpose to sort of get through something.
So true. I like to always, think about the bright side of things. What is your bright side when you think about your work and what you've been through and your legacy?
Well, again, I'm grateful for the experience because I think one of the things about adversity is it gives you more empathy, because you've experienced something. You hopefully you become more kind toward others, and it can be really simple things. For example, so I was getting my water jug filled up the other day. These are 3-gallon water jugs, right? I can carry it in there, and I can carry it back full, and I can put it in my car. So here comes this woman with her maybe 13-year-old daughter, and they obviously had like 6 of these 3-gallon jugs. And they had this cart, and they were struggling with the cart, and they're trying to get the door open. And all these people are walking by, and I literally just sat in my car, and I looked over and saw them, and I thought, well, I can help them. No big deal. This is like nothing, right? So I get out, and I said, can I just help put them in the car? Oh, that'd be great. Well, after I did it, they're like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, it was nothing, So as I backed up, the daughter and the mother like, and I thought, wow, it's little things that you can do for somebody that just kind of made their day. But, if you have an elderly person in your neighborhood, you can help them get groceries one time. Just little things makes everybody feel better and more optimistic, I think. That humanity is good.
Yes, definitely. I love that. I love that. Terry, it's so good talking to you. Your website is terryhealey.com, and Healey is Healey, terryhealey.com. And you're also on Instagram at Terry Healey US. All your information's on your website, though. Thank you so much for this conversation. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate being on the show and enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.